Max, picture this.
Mm-hmm.
You're known the world over. Everyone's relying on you to do the right thing, to succeed. You gotta fight off the naysayers and the evildoers and be the embodiment of positivity, inspiration, and goodwill in the world.
Okay, are you talking about me or are you talking about Jack Black? Because it sounds a lot like Jack Black to me.
Not talking about Jack Black, not even talking about James Gunn. Nope, today we are talking about Superman.
Oh, damn! Welcome to Picture This, the podcast where we examine the weekly box office and ask, what do movie-going trends say about American culture? About our loves, our hates, our curiosities, and sometimes about the things we didn't even know about ourselves.
Moviegoing is an American passion and pastime, but it's in uncertain times right now. So mostly we're here to give you all the reasons to go see movies in theaters the way they were meant to be seen.
Max, screenwriter and son of an independent movie theater owner.
I'm Dave. I've worked in and around movies for the past 10 or so years in movie marketing and development. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about Big Blue, the Man of Steel, Kal-El, the last son of Krypton, or simply Clark. Superman is back in a new actor, new director, and a whole new approach. We're going to get into the 2025 film and where it meets the modern movie-going audience and touch on some other superhero-related subjects. But first, what's the state of the biz? Now, we're talking the current box office, but we just want to caveat, we're recording this the week of the 21st. So we're recording this 2 weeks after Big Blue is in theaters and a couple of days before the big release of Fantastic Four, which is another superhero movie. Just wanted to caveat that. So on the second weekend of release, Superman still reigns supreme. We're obviously going to dive deep into Big Blue in a sec, but important to note, second weekend, Superman's still killing at the box office. Jurassic World Rebirth, I think is the title of the 87th Jurassic movie. Is that right, Max?
That's it. It's crushing
Okay.
too. It's worldwide, soaring past profitability marks and really giving Universal a huge bump.
Unbelievable, man. They just keep pumping them out. And then I Know What You Did Last Summer coming in at about 13 million, and then Smurfs, the animated film, coming at about 11 million. Also, big release this weekend was Eddington, which is the Ari Aster directed movie that starred Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah. So a pretty big surprise, I would say, considering what we've talked about for horror on this podcast, is that I Know What You Did Last Summer not having a super strong opening. Like, it's a horror franchise, kind of flat. Especially considering the success of Scream and Final Destination. Like those movies, I mean, we've had 2 or 3 new Scream reboots.
Yeah, they're on
So
Scream 6 and going into 7, I think.
I was kind of surprised that I Know What You Did Last Summer didn't find an audience, but maybe it's because everybody's going to Superman right now, so who knows. And another real tough beat for the animated family film, our other almost notoriously successful category, according to our stats. The Smurfs film starring Rihanna, we were having a discussion wondering just how much America actually cares about the Smurfs. And then Eddington, an auteur film. This is like kind of our Oscar baity film of the summer, and like a $4 million opening. You know,
Yeah, rough stuff.
weird because it's like Ari Aster, cool director, Joaquin Phoenix, A24, Pedro Pascal, who's about to come out in Fantastic Four, and it's just people were like, you know what, not right now. I had a friend who saw it and he described the film as, you know, everything you hate on the internet. Well, they do all of that in a very uncomfortable way.
We love to talk marketing on this pod, and if you want to hear a marketing sell that does not work, your buddy
Yeah.
just gave it.
We should do an episode on that because I think universally across the board, everyone who I talked to saw the trailer, including me, went, wait, what? And yeah, maybe not the best way to do it. So is there anything outside of box office that's interesting that's popping to you this week?
Dude, a ton. Christopher Nolan's Odyssey, which is one of the most closely watched productions going on right now. This movie is nowhere close to being out in theaters. It's a full year away. It's being released in 2026. The studio that's releasing the film, Universal, put tickets in certain theaters on sale now for a movie that's releasing in 1 year. Typically, movie studios put tickets on sale anywhere from 3 weeks to 5 weeks before the release of the movie. They don't want to bother their audiences for something that's so far out. So usually that's put much closer to the release of this.
Even guys like you and me, guys who really look forward to movies, it's pretty rare even for us to buy a movie ticket in advance.
Max, do you know where you're gonna be in July of 2026? Because I don't know, but so this was definitely a marketing stunt by Universal. Oh, it was in, I think, the top 20 theaters in some of the biggest markets. They put them on sale, and within hours, all of those tickets were sold out. And then within hours of that, they were found on third-party sites being resold for up to $500.
That's pretty awesome.
I think for people that like to talk about movies and like to talk about marketing around movies, I think is a really smart move on their part. I think a lot of people, because of the success of Dark Knight and Oppenheimer and Inception and all of the movies that he's done over the years, he's one of those very few filmmakers that can garner this type of excitement.
Yeah, I think I would be safe to say that America has a lot more faith in Christopher Nolan than they have in the Smurfs.
That's a hot take, Max. Hot take. All right, what else is going on, Max?
Just a quick RIP to Malcolm Jamal Warner, beloved American actor, and it was a bummer to see him go, especially so early. And then actually, possibly some positive news. We have a bipartisan bill that was introduced in the Senate from Senator Josh Hawley, he's out of Missouri, and Richard Blumenthal out of Connecticut, and it's all about AI. And essentially, it would restrict AI companies from using copyrighted material in their training modules without the consent of the individual owner. It's called the AI Accountability and Personal Data Protection Act. It would also allow individuals to sue companies that uses their personal data or copyrighted works without their express prior consent.
This is really interesting, Max. And obviously, we're going to be talking about movies and movie theaters and theater going on this podcast. But right now, there is a lot of conversation about where AI fits. There should be an ongoing discussion about this. But I think in general, we want to preserve this movie theater and movie going experience. And I think AI, it could endanger that in a way.
Also, just the craft of all of the jobs that go into this, and that has been expressed by Miyazaki and also just filmmakers across the board. I know Phil Lord and Chris Miller have come out really hard against it. I worked for those guys, so I just want to give them a hard shout out. Appreciate them doing that.
Yeah.
So, there's a difference between paying homage to something and just like straight up ripping it off in order to put people out of work. And I'm excited to see probably two senators who couldn't disagree with each other on more things come together and be like, it's going to hurt our country and hurt art in general. So that's cool.
And just to wrap up, we're recording this on the precipice of this Fantastic Four movie, which is like Superman in many ways for the DC and Warner Brothers studios, being a big bet on where the future goes for those types of films. Fantastic Four is just a couple days away for being released and will help decide with the fate of future Marvel movies.
Yeah, the success or not success of this film is going to be, I think, earth-shattering either way, and I have strange feelings about Fantastic Four and Marvel in general, but I have to say, even if it doesn't work out, I kind of appreciate what are clearly a lot of weird risks they took in this film, and so maybe I'll tip my hat and just go see it for that reason only.
I can't wait. And we're recording this after the DC release of Superman and before the Marvel release of Fantastic Four. We're at a tipping point and an inflection point. Let's do it, man. Let's get into it. We're going to try to create the ultimate log line, which is describing the film Superman in 10 words or less. Max, do you want to go first?
Sure do. All right, you ready for this one? I thought real hard about it. Superman is framed by bald guy, but is still good.
I think that's the best one I think we've gotten. We've only done this on the Sinners Pod, so I think that's the best of the three we've recorded. It's definitely better than mine.
Someday we'll release a coffee table book, and then it will be a collection of all of our 10-word log lines.
Okay, and mine is, I seed you winning this battle, Max. Mine is just because you're a god doesn't mean you can't have a dog.
I think that captures the spirit of the film a little bit better than mine. Knowing how much dog is actually in that movie.
We're just about to get into it. If you have any other good with 10 words or less plot summaries, please feel free to send them in. The actual plot, I'll just go through this real quick. This is a pre-spoiler, but Superman and his team of other do-gooder superheroes, or what's called metahumans, they battle other bad guy metahumans to protect Metropolis when it becomes clear that the media titan and quasi-pseudo-political influencer and arms dealer, Lex Luthor, has an intricate plot to eliminate Superman once and for all. And if that reads a pretty generic logline about a Superman movie, You'd be right.
Yeah, I mean, just an absolute mouthful and word salad, and honestly, pretty accurate way to describe the plot summary of that movie.
All right, Max, tell us about it.
Yeah, so the auspices. This was written and directed by James Gunn. Now, James Gunn also has taken over with Peter Safran as the creative head of all DC properties. That's Superman, Green Lantern, Batman, all the Batman villains, Harley Quinn, the Joker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Big job. He was the guy who did the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. When he first came over to DC, he did a redo of Suicide Squad, and that rolled into the Peacemaker TV show that people really loved. He seems to be, at least financially speaking, a successful bet that Warner Brothers made on him to be a creative helm.
Max, do you think he's becoming the Kevin Feige type person for DC?
So that's a very interesting question, because I think one of the strengths of Marvel was that Kevin Feige wasn't a director and writer.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think James Gunn, what you'll hear about, in my opinion, about this movie is that him being the producer, director, writer, and creative head of the studio, it's a lot. It's a big job. It's what I would consider too much for one single person to do. I'm sure there's a lot of other cooks in the kitchen and all that other stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think coming off of the success of this Superman and the turn of fortunes for DC, James Gunn is now Mr. DC, and it is what it is. The movie had a really excellent cast. David Cornsweet as Clark Kent, Superman himself. Rachel Brosnahan from Marvelous Miss Maisel. I think, I'm going to say it now, the highlight of the film was her performance. Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, and a bunch of other really great familiar actors. This is the first major movie in the Warner Brothers new direction for DC comic movies, called the DCU, and a lot is riding on this. And so yeah, they put a lot of heart into it.
And Max, before we go even further, because I think we're about to talk about the marketing, we're about to get into our own thoughts on it. Super quick on what you were bringing to the table when it comes to the Superman character and lore and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because, we are the generation of superhero content. I mean, even before the movies started to take off, we were targeted by Saturday morning cartoons. I'm much more of an X-Men kid, and the only real memory I have of Superman is that I had seen the movies from the 70s and 80s, and I remember having fond memories of them, and I don't have any other memory of them. Like, anything that happens in them, I've heard secondhand as the years gone on. So I saw them very young, thought they were cool, haven't really thought about them since. And I didn't have a strong connection to the character of Superman. And I think one of the big appeals about this movie was just kind of seeing what they were going to do with the character.
Where were you on Man of Steel and the Henry Cavill Superman?
Henry Cavill, I thought, was a great cast. I'm not a Zack Snyder fan. I didn't have a lot of faith in what he was going to do with the property. And then I heard from everybody who went to go see those movies that they weren't super solid. And you have to talk me into going to see a superhero movie. There's going to be a big caveat to this entire episode, that you have to talk me into go see a superhero movie.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of talked me out of it, so I didn't see them.
Fair. I think, Max, we're coming around similar. We're of similar age. Growing up, I had definitely seen the Christopher Reeve original movies that were released in the late 70s, 80s, and liked them fine, but didn't have a close emotional connection to them. I will say, in the 2000s, when the Zack Snyder movies were coming out, those movies were also produced by Christopher Nolan, and me being a Christopher Nolan head, I did end up seeing them.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I would say, like, I also enjoyed Henry Cavill. They did take the character of Superman very, very, very seriously, and I think that was all in response to the Dark Knight influence that Christopher Nolan had on those movies. And it didn't totally sit right with me. I think the stock is kind of low on Man of Steel. I will say my opinion of it is a little higher than your average movie nerd, but not super high.
But what about the Batman versus Superman? Wasn't that one like universally low?
Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice came out in the late teens, I want to say, and made a whole bunch of money, but was pretty critically panned. And then ultimately, that plus the Justice League kind of wrapped up that version of Superman, and then leading into this, which is essentially a fresh start on the take of Superman. So with that little backstory on it, Max, tell us about the marketing for this movie, this Superman that you saw out in the world.
I mean, it was everywhere. Like, I was seeing billboards, posters. I have been on the social medias a little bit lately, so I see it on YouTube. I saw ads on Instagram. Nothing that was really terribly distant from a billboard or a trailer. Like it
Hmm.
all seemed very much in the same universe. No unusual or creative marketing really hit me. I have to say, when I first saw the trailer, the first half of it, I was very taken by it, and then the second half, it kind of felt like it went jokey,
Yeah.
and then I was not so taken by that. So that was my experience with the marketing. But because the first half was very intriguing, there was a voice in my head that was like, "Oh, you're gonna go see this movie."
Also similar. I think like I saw a lot of movie marketing materials out there. I saw the trailers, but it all felt pretty uniform. I didn't see a lot of deep exploration on like what the movie was actually going to be. I think it really was leaning on the hey, it's a Superman movie. It's a brand new approach. Come in and see it. I think it's interesting from the marketing's perspective. This movie is just called Superman. It's not called a Man of Steel. It's not called a Dawn of Justice or a Justice League or anything like that. They're trying to simplify the sell. And I think the other thing in the trailer that was revealed to try to give it a newness is that you met Superman's dog Crypto. But other than that, it was like, oh no, this is going to be a classic Superman story, and we'll see if that delivered. Also on socials, I saw a little bit of James Gunn, again, this kind of like producer, writer, director, auteur of this, giving some interviews. I was surprised to see, I did not see a lot of interviews and material from the cast themselves. It was more from James Gunn and what this movie was
Yeah.
meant to be.
And I think that really is what created the mystery of what is this, because we're in our third iteration of Superman. So it's like, what is the new iteration?
So James Gunn, the director, was very much out in front of this, whether it was going to succeed or fail. And I'll jump into box office right now. Like ultimately, so the opening weekend of the movie, it did $125 million domestic, which is a
Huge.
big number. And then again, we mentioned like subsequent weeks were in the second frame of it. It made a solid $57 million the next weekend, and was also the leader in the box office the second weekend. One interesting note is that internationally, the numbers weren't quite as high initially as I think people had hoped.
Very interesting, actually. Yeah.
People are drawing a lot of different conclusions, which we're not going to get into super deep right now. But one of the takes is that Superman is a very American character, and
Mhm.
how is America being viewed by the world right now might not be the most popular. That was one of the takes. But in general, the critics are mostly positive, though not rapturous the way they were on a movie like Sinners. But I think we're on the verge of getting to the spoilers and the takes, which I'm excited to get into with Max. Anything else before we dive in?
I will just say this because it's going to be very important leading into this is on
Okay.
Letterboxd there are hundreds of thousands of reviews and it has a 4.2 out of 5, which is remarkably high. Like remarkably high, like we're talking probably top 100 movies on Letterboxd high.
Wow.
These are by, and this is a social media app by movie nerds. I find that puzzling, but we'll get into that in a second.
All right, we're in the spoiler-filled section now. Max, what did you think of Superman?
Yeah, I had a extremely negative viewing experience of this movie. Like I left the movie theater sad. I left kind of depressed, which is the polar opposite of the way the filmmakers intended it to be. Because if you connect the dots on it, you're supposed to leave the entire time they're building a character that makes the morally good, righteous choice no matter what circumstance he's in, and that's supposed to be very uplifting. But I found it to be just completely manufactured in a
Uh,
way that made me very sad.
oh, man. Wow.
Dave, your reaction makes me think that you're like the rest of America and you didn't feel that way?
I think I left being like, "Huh, that's a different take on Superman than I've seen." I think my heart did not totally embrace it, but my head was like, "Okay, I think I can get on board with this." I have notes, but ultimately, I think I agreed with the vast majority, which is like mostly positive.
Remarkably positive. Like I said, the letterbox says it all. Like it's remarkably positive, and I'm sitting there just going, "How?"
In your review, do you give it points because it is in a superhero genre?
Look,
Or are you just like, no,
look,
you can compare this to Sinners or Citizen Kane the same
no, I
way?
don't I don't I don't like to compare apples to oranges. I don't like to do that. I like to take movies at what they are intending to be. But I don't like to pretend. You know how sometimes people say, "Well, a movie's just a movie," and I don't think that's true. Like, I think art is a conversation that we are having with ourselves, and it doesn't have to be a serious conversation. A lot of my favorite movies of all time are not serious. Pineapple Express is not a very serious movie, and the conversation it's having with its audience is, kind of silly, but It's a clear, concise conversation where the characters are engaging with ideas about the legality of marijuana and the consequences of being a stoner, and every choice that they make, they has a sort of consequence, which I thought was missing from this film.
Okay.
The very
Um,
interesting thing about Superman is that he is essentially a god, and they're making no secrets about this in the movie itself. He is a god, and he could either
benevolent?
be evil or good, right? And he and what's interesting about the Superman character is that he always chooses good. That's very interesting. But I felt this movie, it relied solely on our collective consciousness around who and what the Superman myth is in order to tell a story about why Superman is good. But if you're only relying on our collective consciousness and you're not having a character show up in a situation and be faced with choices and dilemmas, then it's like we already know he's good. So why is this happening? And I compare it to, like, making a movie about Jesus, because Superman is kind of Jesus. Like, they're both gods and they both are, the whole thing, the whole myth is around them just ultimately making good choices despite having any or many reasons not to. But if you made a movie about Jesus and you didn't show him gaining enemies as he helped the poor and countered, the teachings of the dominant power players of the region, and how most importantly the apostles go from doubters to followers, and then him being conflicted about how to handle betrayal from one of his dear friends that he knows will ultimately lead to his extremely painful death, you're just kind of making a movie that's like, hey, y'all know Jesus, right? He was good. All right, here's some miracles. Ba-do-ba-do-ba-do.
Max, I feel like our 10-word log line should have just been that little impression that you did. Which
Well, if we could do impressions and log lines, I'm gonna be carrying that into future episodes for sure.
and just to level set, and I'll end with a question, I promise. Obviously,
Yeah.
we're deep in spoilers, and we're not gonna go chronologically through the whole movie, but the movie starts out, you're being thrust into the center of kind of an adventure. There is a long, you could say absurdly long, chirons appear on screen, words appear on screen, where the audience is told that you're not going to hear the Superman origin story. You're not going to see how he leaves his planet of Krypton and yada, yada, yada. And essentially, it's a lot of history of the world that the audience is being introduced in. One, that there are already special human beings called metahumans or superheroes in this world. People in this world know who Superman is. And the end of the long Chiron is essentially Superman has been defeated for the first time. Now, I thought it was a very smart way to reintroduce a superhero that most people would define as being unbeatable. And I think that's often been the complaint about Superman
Mhm.
as a character to root for, is that he's a god. He can't be defeated. And with this generation of moviegoers, the last 20, 30 years that Max, you and I are a part of, the most successful versions of superheroes are Batman and Spider-Man, two superheroes that are very flawed and very human. And that, therefore, Superman has been so difficult to pitch because the Christopher Reeves versions, the other versions, it's very hard to come up with a formidable opponent to him if he's just always going to win. The first image you see of Superman in this movie, though, is him bloodied and beaten. Did that work for you?
Here's my issue with that opening, right?
Okay.
What's interesting about Superman being defeated is watching him be defeated. This entire movie hinges on the fact that Superman goes and prevents a war from happening between these two fake countries that are obviously based on real countries. A much more interesting opening scene to me is him going, purposefully choosing to prevent the war, a righteous act. Then the villain that beats him shows up, and you're like, who's this metahuman? Oh, this metahuman fights him. It's actually hugely problematic because it looks like that guy wants the war to happen.
Yeah.
And it looks like Superman's going to be doing okay, but then he loses the fight. Oh my God. What are the implications for that? Instead, we open on an explanation for that, exposition for that. Then a dog shows up, drags him back to the Fortress of Solitude. He gets beamed up with magical healing powers, and he goes back to the city. And guess what? The fucking guy beats him anyways in the city where the consequences aren't there and don't matter. So who cares? That's not as interesting to me.
Max, you're touching on two interesting takes to this, which is one, you're a writer, Max, and like I have been around writers for many, many years. I think there's a rule, especially in movies, where you're not supposed to tell, you're supposed to show. So in general, this is breaking a lot of those rules, right up the bat. Is like
Dude,
you're
this
just
movie,
gonna
the
read about it.
amount of
The counter argument to that, though, the show don't tell is Star Wars. Everyone remembers the opening to Star Wars, and you just read a long, weird paragraph about
yeah.
where the world is. And I think what I've read, this is not my take, but the benefit of that is like it is a lot of things to read that, frankly, normally gets an audience really down to be like, why am I in a movie and I'm just like reading something? That's stupid.
Sure.
However, the argument for is that like you just get dropped into this world and you're just expected to keep up. I think that is the benefit of this, which is that long, boring
But
list
you're
of
not
words.
but my thing is you're not keeping up with anything. It sets you up for something, and then it pulls you backwards, and then it gives you a less interesting version of the thing that they just told us about. If it had opened up with all that, and Superman was super beat up and was out of commission, and what we saw was the effect of Superman not being around to protect Metropolis, or what makes so much more sense is if Superman got beat up while trying to stop a war by a metahuman who's trying to encourage that war. If Superman's taking out of commission, that army should have moved into that country and there should have been catastrophic consequences for Superman not being there. But that's
Mhm.
not what happened. They held on to that till the final scene of the movie. So it was just kind of like, yeah, your Star Wars argument is totally correct, and I understand that was the intention. I understand not wanting to do the origin story again, but there's a good version of that, and it was done in the first Tom Holland Spider-Man. We didn't learn anything about how Spider-Man got his powers or anything, blah, 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 blah,
Totally.
but immediately the character is faced with, like, challenges that had nothing to do with the origin story. But this movie is about Superman's relationship with his parents. So how in the sweet fuck are we not spending time with his parents? The entire movie hinges on how he feels about his biological parents versus his adoptive parents, the myth that his biological parents told him versus what it meant to be raised by, human Americans in Kansas. And like, we have so little of that in this movie. So being like, "Oh, don't worry, everybody, we're not gonna do the origin story. We're just gonna make an entire movie that hinges on the origin story," and seemed like an insane choice to me. And this really goes to the heart of what my criticism is, and it's my criticism of James Gunn as a whole,
Okay.
is I just never feel like he knows how to set up a movie, set up a moment that is earned from a character. In the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, the characters spend a good deal of time talking about how they need to go to a prison in the galaxy that is the most notorious prison. It has the worst criminals. It's the most heavily guarded. It's impossible to escape. And we have to get arrested and we have to go in there to get some prisoner that's in there. We have to get that guy and we have to get him out. And I was like, I was so jazzed when I was watching that. Oh my God, we're going to have like a prison escape. It's going to be the great escape. It's going to be like Ocean's 11. It's going to be all this thing. And then there's this huge buildup to it. And they get there and they're like, all right, we're locked in this cell. How are we going to get out of the most notorious prison? The door opens. And the door just opened and they walked out. And then there was like a cute song that played, and they floated around in zero gravity, and I went like, "What? Like, why? That's so not interesting." Like, if I wanted to watch music videos, I'd turn on YouTube, and that's how I kind of feel about James Gunn as a whole.
Super zoomed back because I know we started to talk about like plot points and we can get back in there. But I guess my pro take for it is this is that I think in the overall superhero landscape, we had mentioned Man of Steel earlier. And that was very, again, different director, different producers, different Superman. That was very deliberate and methodical. I think it really tried hard to set up and earn the stakes of where he eventually got. And I think a lot of moviegoers didn't like the dourness of it.
Mhm.
And that's my assumption of it. But I will say what this does in contrast to that is it doesn't take itself very seriously. It purposely tries to be light on its feet. It is one of the shorter superhero movies that we've seen in a really long time at just about 2 hours.
I
Um,
appreciate it. I do
but
appreciate that.
I think because of that, one of the negative effects is like they probably cut maybe setup scenes.
I don't know, man, because like, I've seen other James Gunn movies, and they're all this is kind of the vibe, man.
But at
Like
the same time, I would argue it's trying to be light on its feet which again you can decide if you like that or not, and more playful, but also at the same time take on some more serious issues. Max, you already mentioned like there's a war between two countries in a different part of the world that if you squint, that could be Israel and Palestine. If you squint, that could be Ukraine and
I
Russia.
don't I don't think you have to squint that hard, dude. Like,
Yeah.
you really don't have to squint that hard.
Yeah. I think we can also say that like the villain of the film, Lex Luthor, who is a familiar face in the Superman lores, but like very much looks like a mixture between Elon Musk,
He's got that Jeff Bezos head, that's for sure.
and he is a tech billionaire with influence over politics. So at the same time, I think James Gunn tried to do a movie that was light on its feet while still alluding to some pretty serious
Yeah.
themes and issues.
But,
But
like, look,
I think what I'm hearing from you, Max, is he didn't do his homework enough to take on those themes. Is
yeah,
that
I mean,
in it right?
I have a lot of reasons why, like, I think that thematically didn't work. Look, I think everything that happened in that movie was done in service because the movie needed it to happen, right? Like, Superman guilts a guy into creating a son, not because, like, it needed to happen in that moment, but the movie really needed it to happen to get to the next scene. Mr. Fantastic, who was a huge highlight of this movie. I thought
Yeah.
that guy was awesome. Him and Rachel Brosnahan were super awesome as Lois Lane. But Mr. Fantastic gets to hack the interdimensional tunnel because that's what the movie needed him to do. Superman got locked away and it was just like, well, there somebody's got to fix this. Like it was so interesting early on for Lois Lane to be like, look, I'm just not good at relationships. I don't think this is going to work out.
Yeah.
And then like spend no time with Clark Kent or Superman for the rest of the movie, and then for him to appear in the end and be like, "Oh my god, I love you so much." It's like, "What?" I don't think we need to hold people's hands like this. If you think of like golden age Pixar, look, I understand this movie's made for very, very young people, but like so is golden age Pixar movies. And in golden age Pixar movies, they take things away from you and they hurt.
Mhm.
Nothing hurt in this film. Nothing.
I remember reading this in an interview. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg made Indiana Jones, and one of their lines was like, "We wanted to be a Saturday afternoon serial of an old adventure story from the 1940s." And this felt like how Gunn wanted to approach this, which is just like, we're giving you the familiar but kind of generic bad guy. We're going to
Mhm.
give you kind of familiar stakes, and at the end of the movie, the villain's going to be captured, and we all kind of assume he'll be back again. And I also think like maybe that's just what this audience, like us as an audience members,
If
need.
they if but what that's and all that stuff's fine. I have
Yeah.
no problems with that. I have no problems with, like, the big picture choices that were made. It just felt like to me that the consequences meant nothing, and I feel like the edges on this movie are so softened that just like, who cares about anything?
Did you think after the opening sequence that we talked about with him being beaten down, one of the earlier conversations that works for me is when Clark Kent is back in his apartment and Lois Lane comes over and then ends up interviewing
Yeah.
Superman slash Clark is kind of taken aback that his girlfriend, who is now acting like a professional and a reporter that she is asking some really hard questions. And Superman only has very simple and idealistic answers, which is
Like a boy might have, an immature boy might have, and not a mature man. Yeah, it was great.
and then one of the best jokes in the film is when Lois asks Superman, "How do you think the interview's going?" And Superman responds, "Well, I think I'm doing a good job."
Yeah, that was good. That was
But do
good.
you think I think that confrontation of like, "Hey Superman, your moral code is so simplistic and you're in a really complicated world." Did that scene work for you?
That scene in A Bubble works for me. It was completely undelivered upon. So what an interesting scene where Lois Lane exposes Superman to be a boy in a movie that is supposed to be about a man's struggles with his idea of parentage. What do my parents mean to me? And then he in so instead of going out into the world and reacting the way a boy might, and they almost did this. Like when his dog gets stolen, he flies into Lex Luthor's office and throws a tantrum. And I feel like that was kind of halfway there to what it should have been. But if you're a god, like Superman is a god, like he needed to actually throw a little boy tantrum. And the people who needed to bring him back to himself were actually his parents.
Mhm.
And like he flies out there unconscious
Mhm.
And then his dad goes, "Hey, buddy." This dad who we've never seen, we've never had a moment with him. His dad leans in and goes, "Hey, buddy, I'm proud of you." And Superman goes, "Yeah, you're right. I got to go be Superman again." But he had already made that choice to be Superman again. So it was kind of an inconsequential moment. And yeah, like that scene where like a human being exposes this god's flaws as being childish could be really interesting, but I think it was really undelivered upon. I have one more gripe that I just want to say
Go, do it. Yeah.
before we get into why America liked this movie so much. Um, okay, so you remember in Avengers 1, how that
Yeah.
movie ended? They finally capture Loki, they're in the tower, and he's about to monologue and be like, "This is why I did all those things," and then the Hulk picks him up and just slaps him around the room. It was like a big moment in cinema history. You know, it kinda changed a lot about action tentpole movies and an artist's relationship with an audience. In the end of this movie, Superman is in the tower with Lex Luthor, and he's monologuing about all the things that he doesn't think are wrong about his evil, and then a dog flies in and grabs him and throws him around the room. And I was like, "Dude, you can't even come up with your own moment like this? You had to rip off this other one that already exists?"
That's fair. A lot of what I'm hearing from you, Max, is like James Gunn does love to undercut the tension. Like, we're going to build all these expectations for the audience, and then we're going to take a left turn as a joke. And that just doesn't sounds like it works for you. This is maybe having way too low of expectations, but I think part of the reason that I ended up being pro is it introduced of Superman that I hadn't seen before, and one that could get injured, and that one is kind of on an emotional journey, to your point of like he's kind of childish in how he thinks about solving world problems. And then it got some real world ideas about things
Mhm.
that we're going through as far as navigating international political issues. Got some issues about how a government is dealing with tech money into a very broad movie. So I think in general that's why I'm giving it a positive. And I think what I'm hearing from you is, yeah, he brought up these things and he didn't deliver on any of it. He just said, yeah, here's some ideas, you figure it out.
I appreciate its ambition, I really do, because I'm one of my critiques, Jurassic Park World Rebirth Redo, it just felt like a very ambitionless movie, ambitionless, void of ambition in a movie, and that makes me mad in its own right. But I don't know, man. Like, engage with the serious ideas seriously, and you can do that and be funny, and you could do that and be light on your feet, and you could do that and be jovial.
I don't know if I agree though. Maybe that's a fine place for us to net out. Is like I
Yeah.
think you actually, as negative as your feelings of this, if that's the net of it, Max, you actually have more faith in the filmmakers and the ambition of a movie than I do. I think I'm kind of leaving it as like, yeah, they made it kind of playful and they bring up themes, but I know they're not going to
I
figure it
mean,
out.
and I don't want to get into how much I think they failed on getting into those themes because other people have written about it, so you could find it articulated better elsewhere.
Okay, what else you got?
Okay. Well, let's get into why we thought America went to see this movie and why they liked it so much, considering all of my complaints. So, if you had to put a couple of notches on what brought people out, what would you say?
I think it's this reaction to previous superhero movies that are weighty and very serious. I think this movie represented a world literally that is just brighter in color than we've seen previously. The previous Superman movie, which we've mentioned, came out just aesthetically looking very, very dark. Where
Yeah.
the aesthetics of this movie is bright, it's popcorny, it wants to be a kind of a Saturday morning cartoon. I think the lightness of it and the fact that they hadn't seen a Superman that could be injured, a Superman that has an ill-behaved dog, a
Oh, yeah.
Superman that can bleed. I think that is something that they hadn't seen before, and I think that was enough of a reason to get people in the theaters.
Yeah. I mean, I think we said it earlier too. I think just the curiosity of like, okay, what is the Superman going to be? It is like a Superman that I think a lot of people in this country are unfamiliar with. And I think that's paying dividends for them. And, whether or not you think it's the right Superman is going to be completely subjective. But yeah, I also do think America just loves James Gunn, man. Like they really love those Guardians movies that are hugely successful films. And I think people had a lot of faith in him. People who weren't named Max Kessler had a lot of faith in him. No, also think like in the moment that we're in, we've had so many flawed heroes, like you're saying. We've had a lot of anti-heroes, but it's been a while since we had just like a straight up, unflawed, morally true north hero. And quite frankly, I feel like Our culture wants a hero like that. They want a Superman that's like that. And I think the only other person out there that's like that is Ted Lasso, and you could see how successful that was. So it seems like our culture is begging for someone who's not corrupt, who doesn't have morally questionable character, who is just like a good person because being good is right. Because we don't have that in our leadership in the world right now, and I think everybody's feeling it.
I totally agree, and I will also add that I feel like James Gunn sprinkled just enough of modernity into the Superman. He is like morally a good North Star and a great shining beacon of hope for us, but still was modern enough where I think people could identify him. He doesn't feel like he is from a different world, and I think that was is like literally expressed in the final act. He actually says, "I am more of a human than you are, Lex Luthor, because I am scared and I have all these other
Well, he says, "I'm
complicated
exactly
emotions."
the same as you,"
Yes.
doesn't he? He's just like you.
And
Yeah.
I think that was enough of a positioning where, to your point, Max, I agree. I think there are a few moral north stars for people to look through right now. And I think another thing is being reflected on this podcast is that, Max, you and I think like we love the complicated anti-hero. Like we love the
Mm.
Breaking Bads and the Batmans of the world. But it did sound like for most of the American audience, there was enough yearning for something like this that
I
people
mean,
went to go
I
see it.
think I'm yearning for it too. Don't let me get you wrong, but I think to go back to my thing earlier, Superman lives in a corrupt world, so you have to give him Sophie's choices in order to really show what you give up when you are deciding to be a morally righteous person. Shouldn't be able to save everyone, but he does in this movie.
I agree with you, Max. It just feels like in this movie they didn't want to get that deep. They were
Yeah, no, they just and I don't know, it feels safe in the way that a lot of modern film is very safe, and I think ultimately harmful to our culture because we don't see our heroes faced with complicated choices. There's complicated choices characters have to make in Pineapple Express, and it's a fucking dumb movie, you know what I mean? And there's complicated choices that characters have to make in Wall-E, and they don't even have dialogue in that movie.
Yeah,
And I didn't feel like there was any complicated choice that a god had to make in a movie, and I feel like that's a hugely missed opportunity.
that's fair. Do you have any hot takes?
My first is, maybe not that hot, but, I think that everyone's very, very high opinion of this movie is going to dissipate over time, and it's going to dissipate very quickly. Remember when The Last Jedi came out? That was the 2nd of the 3rd Star
Yeah.
Wars trilogy, and people were crazy about it, and they were, "Oh my god, this is the best Star Wars movie I've ever seen," and blah, 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 and I remember just being like, I don't think it was that good," and people, like, got in my face about it, like, "Blah, blah, blah," and, like, forget about Star Wars movie, I just thought it was a deeply flawed movie, kind of for the same reasons as this. Is a lot of character choices felt inconsequential, felt like they weren't in response to things that had already happened. Forget about any of the aesthetics or the mythology or all of that. It just kind of didn't hold up. But like a year later, I was talking to people and they're like, "Oh yeah, man, that movie sucks." And I was like, "Oh, whoa."
Um, okay, my hot take. Maybe this take doesn't feel so hot because Max has been dunking on this movie for the last several minutes, but for I think from a guy who is more positive and probably a bit more reflective on what a lot of America thinks about it. Again, they mostly think it's positive. So this movie was the first to launch the DC universe. And this is supposed to kick off this big next chapter for Warner Brothers and DC. Right now, everyone is saying, like, hey, what a great success. Other than Max Kessler, this movie's fantastic, how great it is. And the movie's still really performing at the box office. My hot take is I don't know if it's performing good enough to warrant a whole new universe. It's performing very well. In no corner will they think of this movie in isolation being a failure at all. However, for the types of movies that it needs to launch several series of movies and introducing other characters, $125 million is great, but I don't know if it's the runaway success that will necessarily support 7, 10, 15 more DC movies. And again, different from Max, I think James Gunn did a pretty good job in challenging material. So I don't know how the next versions get exponentially better than this. Max
Right.
probably disagrees. He sees a lot of room for improvement.
Right,
But
but I don't have a lot of faith that that's gonna come. I feel like I'm in the same boat with you with that. Part of it is just these movies are too big. If you had spent, I don't know, 100 million less dollars animating a CGI dog into every frame of this movie, like $125 million opening looks a lot different than where
yeah,
it did with what they have. So yeah, that's interesting. Okay, last hot take. Why am I so bothered by this whole ordeal? Right? So, it makes me feel why I'm so bothered, and it makes me feel like we're just not engaging with our own culture critically. It makes me think that America thinks Superman is interesting because he can beat up all the things in the world that we can't beat up, and that they should be beat up, and that I wish he did it for me. And that's not really different from how conservative America, who has had a pretty strong reaction to whatever the wokeness of this film, but it's not really different than conservative calling Trump daddy.
Hmm.
And this is not meant to be a political space with you and me, but I have distinct memories of getting in arguments on the playground as like a 6-year-old, and they always devolve to, "Well, oh yeah, my dad could beat up your dad." And that's what this movie kind of feels like we're saying, "Yeah, my Superman could beat up your Superman." Yeah, it just feels, for a movie about Superman behaving childishly, the fact that America likes it so much feels very childish.
Are you saying that Superman is the American dictator that we want? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, yes. I mean, it is the myth of the benevolent king,
Yeah.
right? Oh,
Mhm.
like, monarchy's the best if we just had a guy who was nice to everybody, you know what I mean?
That's a great take. I really like that. And maybe that is what this why this country loved the movie as much as it did. Is
Yeah.
just like a simplified escape to someone to just
Come and
take
fix
over
all
and
our
do the right
problems.
thing for us and fix all the
Yeah,
problems. Yeah, that's
yeah.
really interesting. All right, Max, do we think the movie was successful? I think I'm gonna say yes. Because I think it is making a cultural impact. I think
Mhm.
I'm interested to hear. I like Max's take to see, like, we'll see if we're still talking about Superman in 6 months, or if this will just kind of disappear into the ether. Max, what do you think?
I think what you're saying about the box office is very correct, but I still think the numbers are the numbers, and it's gonna be the most viewed movie of the year, possibly domestically, so that's successful. For James Gunn, yeah, he's gonna get 10 years to do kinda whatever he wants, and that's very good for him. For the cultural zeitgeist, I think it's successful, but I think that has catastrophic consequences for the same reasons that I just kinda went through. For cinematic history, no, I don't think it's gonna, like, really leave its mark in cinematic history, but the one thing that I think is nice about that it's going to have is that we're gonna see the return of the man in the white hat. We're gonna see a return of the good guy's good guy.
Yeah, I'm interested in that exploration. I agree with you, Max. I wouldn't mind seeing some more heroes that want to just do the right thing. And maybe this will open the door for a more interesting exploration than you think you got off of this version of it.
Yeah. And then to put a button on that, like you mentioned earlier that a lot of people are saying the international success or lack thereof of this movie has to do with it is this aspirational, this is what we think America should be or what good is. And a lot of the countries around the world are like, yeah, but you're America. And, like, you're a culture that's having a delusional moment, and we're not really willing to hop on it. That said, it hasn't premiered in Russia, it hasn't premiered in China, but there's still money to be made out there somewhere. But it's not doing well, weirdly, it's not doing well in Australia, it's not doing well in the United Kingdom. Those are English-speaking countries. Is it successful there? I don't know.
Super interesting. Well, I'm so happy we dug into it. Let's wrap it up, Max. Other than washing your body off of all the Superman that you've dealt with, what give us one thing that you're looking forward to seeing this month?
Well, I'm super looking forward to seeing Eddington just because it deals with a lot of the things that I'm complaining about are lacking in Superman. I am concerned it's going to be like such a major turn in the other direction that it's going to make me feel bad in other ways. But, the people I have talked to have seen it said it's good, it's just difficult. And maybe Grumpy Max Kessler needs a good but difficult movie right now.
I've been saving it, Max, but I saw Eddington
Oh,
recently, and
sweet.
it is a polarizing movie. I think the reviews out there are very polarizing. We said earlier in the box office, because the movie didn't perform as well as many had hoped. A 24, I think, wanted higher numbers for it.
Yeah,
I thought it was fantastic. I thought it
right.
was very complicated, and many of the things Max brought up about complaints about Superman and its social analysis of Superman. Eddington, man, it goes deep. It goes hard on what America is. Joaquin Phoenix gives a great performance. I'd encourage everyone to go see it. Though it is challenging, I felt myself laughing almost as much as I was tense by it. I
That's
thought it was
awesome.
great.
Well, let's say this. You got two movies on the polar opposite of the experience. Go see Superman to see who's more right, me or Dave, and go see Eddington just to kind of see how that counter programs Superman. That's a great like Barbenheimer type of situation right now for the American people.
Double feature it
Double feature and know how to fix America, and that's what we need you to do.
and report back. Please
Yes,
email us.
report back.
Well, that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for listening, Max. You're the man. I love your takes.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you.
We'll see you guys at the movies.
See you at the movies.